I was eating a cheeseburger outside on the patio at the hospice. His sister's talking to me, and she says, Holden, did John have any final words? Did he say anything to you? Did he have any message for you? And here I am sitting here eating this cheeseburger, like halfway through it. And I said no. And she said, okay, I just wanted to ask. And she started to go back inside. And I said, hold on. I know this is going to sound crazy and this is super weird, but, and I kind of held up my burger and I said, he said cheeseburger. That was the last thing he said to me was cheeseburger. And this woman just starts fucking crying. There was a period of time before the birth of my daughter in which I was volunteering at a hospice. If you don't know, hospice is where they take people from the hospital or their home at the end of their life so they can get their final care, so they can get a little more medicine and prepare to cross over. There's usually no coming back from hospice, though it does happen. I've seen it happen. This was the last patient that I would ever do this with. His name was John, and John was a feisty guy. He didn't believe in much of anything. He certainly didn't believe in God. Within the first few days of him getting there, he was talkative. He was a Vietnam veteran. He talked a lot about his time in the jungle and how it had haunted him his whole life since leaving. He talked about going into tunnels and blowing up children and all kinds of horrible stuff you'd never want to, have to live through. And he said it so stoically, the way he talked about this stuff. And one afternoon, we got onto God. He was saying how he doesn't believe in God. And he believed that in a few days or weeks, when he closed his eyes again, it would be over and everything would go dark for him. And so one afternoon, when the time was coming closer to him passing over, he would be in the process of what you would call active dying. The hospice nurses knew we were a few days away at most. I had gone out to get some coffee, and he was unconscious or sleeping at this point, dying of a pretty aggressive form of cancer. And when I came back in the room, John had this little smile on his face, and his eyes were closed. And he was mumbling as if he was somewhere else. He was having a full sort of interaction somewhere else. And it was the first time I'd see him smile. And I couldn't quite make out what he was saying, but he was clearly overwhelmed by joy in whatever moment he was experiencing. And I had seen this sort of behavior in a few other people, but it was almost like a moment of visiting from the other side. And so I just kind of sat in the corner of the room and watched for a few minutes as, as he had this experience. And then later that evening, John was lucid for the first time in, 24 hours. And lucid enough, to be looking at me. And I was telling him some stories I was reading from David Thoreau's Walden. And he just looked at me and he said, cheeseburger. The man just said cheeseburger. And he had the biggest smile on his face. And that was the last word he would say to me. And he kind of went under later that night. And sometime in the next overnight period, I think, it was about 4 or 5 in the morning, John passed on. And from what I saw, John came in to hospice very cold, very ready to go, very assured that there was nothing on the other side for him. And that final day when I saw John, he was clearly communing with with an energy on the other side. And then his last words to me with this weird smile were cheeseburger. And I didn't know what that meant. And I thought it was funny. And I remember joking about that. So the next day, his sister, who's older, she's in her, I want to say early 80s, arrives and she's missed John's passing and she's upset. I had stuck around because I knew they were coming. So I wanted to be part of the team to greet her. And, you know, she was one of the only people coming for John to try to say goodbye. And unfortunately, he couldn't hold on to do that. But it was lunchtime. And I don't think it had anything to do with his last word of cheeseburger. But I was eating a cheeseburger outside on the patio at the hospice. Nice little flowered garden area. And his sister's talking to me, and she says, Holden, did John have any final words? Did he say anything to you? Did he have any message for you? And here I am sitting here eating this cheeseburger, like halfway through it. And I said, no. And she said, okay, I just wanted to ask. And she started to go back inside. And I said, hold on. I know this is going to sound crazy and this is super weird, but, and I kind of held up my burger and he said cheeseburger. That was the last thing he said to me was cheeseburger. And this woman just starts fucking crying. She just starts crying right there and there's tears dripping down her face. And I said, what does that mean? Clearly it meant something. And she said, cheeseburger was his twin brother who died when he was a teenager. So John, in that moment where I left the room and came back and he was smiling, was clearly being visited by his long lost twin brother whose nickname was Cheeseburger. That doesn't get you, I don't know what does.